Welcome artistic visitors to Monet Cafe. I'm artist Susan Jenkins, and today I'm going to be describing something that is really quite important for many pastel artists, whether you're beginning or advanced. It's so important to understand the differences, advantages and disadvantages in either using non-sanded or sanded pastel papers. So join me in this video where I am going to give you not only the differences between the two, but hopefully some of the advantages and disadvantages of each. Believe it or not, that was a sanded UArt paper. This is actually just plain drawing unsanded paper. And believe it or not, this is the painting that I did on the unsanded drawing paper. And there were a lot of advantages to unsanded papers that I think sometimes we toss it out and forget about it. This was the example done on the Le Carte Sennelier pastel card. So I hope this video will be advantageous to pastel artists of every level, and it's a fun exploration. I suggest you try it yourself with the same reference image. Now, I'm also going to be including some special content only over on my Patreon page. So while I'm always going to be providing the free videos here on YouTube, per many of your requests, I am going to have some special content just for my patrons. And in this case, I had a special request to ask to show me picking out my pastels for a particular painting. So I really go into depth here. I had my camera to where you can see it, and I think it will be beneficial. All right, let's get started looking at the differences between sanded and unsanded surfaces. Hello and welcome to Monet Cafe. I'm artist Susan Jenkins, and I'm once again bringing you a free art video tutorial, and I am temporarily away from home in a little temporary studio I have set up at my parents' home while I'm helping my mom during her cancer treatments. She's doing great, by the way. So if this is your first time here, I hope you will check it out. This is a great resource to learn more about soft pastel painting. I do other mediums occasionally, but mostly it's a wonderful way to learn more, even if you're a beginner, for this beautiful medium. So if you're interested at all in that, I would suggest for you to subscribe, hang out, and also join our Monet Cafe art group on Facebook. It has turned into the most beautiful thing. There are so many artists all helping each other of every level. You don't have to feel intimidated if you're a beginner because it's just a beautiful place of sharing, growing, and learning. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a special painting right now, and I hope to share a little bit more about why it's special within the video. So come on, let's get started. For this painting, I will be using a sheet of, it's called Pastel Card, and it's made by the company Sennelier. Now it's got like three names: Sennelier, Pastel Card, Le Carte Pastel. And the beautiful thing about this paper, well, I like this pad. Let me describe first. This one, they come in two sizes. I think this is the larger one. But this pad comes with different colors, and I've used a lot of them out of here, but for this particular painting I'm going to be using this, it's kind of a brownish greenish color. It's a nice neutral medium here, but the wonderful thing about this paper is that it is, of course, when we use soft pastels, it is really advantageous to use a sanded paper. And that literally means like sandpaper in the hardware store. Now, you can practice on hardware store sandpaper as long as it's not too coarse, but it's not the best medium for permanent paintings, or the best surface or support for permanent paintings, because it's not acid-free or what's called archival in the art world, which means if you're ever going to enter anything in a show, you want to make sure that's a quality paper that's not going to yellow over time, and that's what these more professional sanded papers are. So this particular pastel card made by Sennelier has a very nice sanded surface. I would say it's probably equivalent to, I don't know, it's a little bit more coarse than a UArt, if you're familiar with that company, a 400 grit, and it's just a little bit of a different surface. I find my pastels behave differently on the surface. It lends, for me personally, more towards an impressionistic style, a looser style, which I really like. Now keep in mind, many of my tutorials will show me using some sort of a water medium. You can do watercolor underpainting or acrylic underpainting, put on clear gesso, but this paper is not not water friendly, okay? It will, this stuff starts just kind of deteriorating if you add water. So this is pastel only. I have found out that I can spray some spray fixative on it. I never fix my paintings at the end, but sometimes I'll spray it to get a little extra tooth or darken an area in the foreground. But I found that does work, and this paper takes it okay, except don't use fixative at the end. It only darkens your final painting. All right, so that's a little bit about this pastel card made by Sennelier. And now the image that I'm using, as I paint, I'll tell you a little bit more about the story behind this image, but I found a really beautiful vase of flowers on pmp-art.com. It used to be called paintmyphoto.com, and they changed it to pmp-art.com, but it's a great resource where a lot of people take photos and they share them, and they're giving you the okay as an artist to use them to paint from. Okay, so they're copyright free. All they ask on the site is for you to share what you paint to the person, you kind of link it together to the person who did the photo. And I thought this was a lovely vase of hydrangeas, and I just love these flowers. I thought the colors were beautiful. So again, I had a rhyme and reason behind why I chose some flowers. Again, I'll maybe explain a little bit about that in between the painting tutorial. So let's get started on this, and I'll go over I've had a request to share how I choose my colors, and I'll talk a little bit about pastels while I do that. Okay, so hopefully this will be a great informative video for you. All right, here we go. Okay, now to get started with the first, that's actually the sanded pastel card taped down to my table easel, but now I'm going to put the drawing paper. It's just I don't have a picture of the pad here, but it's just a pad of gray drawing paper. I really like to draw on a value rather than just white, like a neutral value, a gray value, and that way you can use some white in your drawing as well. But anyway, so this is just my piece of gray drawing paper. I'm using what I had on hand. Again, I was away from my studio for the first painting, for the one on the drawing paper. I was back at my home studio. Praise the Lord, my mom's doing a lot better. She's done with her treatments. So for the one that I did on the sanded paper, I was back in my home studio and tried to keep all the same colors for both paintings, but there was a few differences. But anyway, okay, time to get started here. And I'm basically just going to do a little sketch. When you're doing anything like vases, vases, however you say it, animals, people, anything that's got some things that are more precise that you want to get right, that would make your painting look amateur if you didn't get it right, it is a good idea to get an accurate drawing in. Now, I know people have all kinds of different techniques for drawing. Over the years, I've kind of developed my own little technique, kind of talk about it a lot, where I split my my paper kind of in half, vertically and horizontally, and I've learned to kind of draw proportionally. I compare objects a lot when I draw. Compare where, like for example, the negative space and positive space of the actual vase, and then the negative space between the vase and the drooping flower, and I look at where the leaf is, and I don't always get it perfect, but it's become a good method for me to kind of get things in fairly accurately, and then I sort of fine tune it as I paint. Now I'm going to start talking now about the advantages and disadvantages, first of all, of this first one, which is the drawing paper, which would be an unsanded or non-sanded surface. Most pastel artists start out and you don't know any better, so you just start working on like drawing paper, and you don't get the results that you see other professional artists have, and you get a little frustrated, and finally, voila, lo and behold, someone tells you about sanded paper, and then we all get to sand it, or many of us start working on the sanded paper, and we fall in love with that, and we realize, man, I can get so many more layers, I can get more richness in my color, it doesn't just fall off the paper, so there's all these positives. But let me right now say that I have really enjoyed going back and working on non-sanded or unsanded surfaces. There are some real advantages to it. First advantage I'm going to bring up is it forces a more loose and painterly style. Because you can't get so many layers, you know you're not going to work this thing to death, or you better not, because it'll show very quickly that you've overworked it. So it forces you to kind of stop a little bit faster. One of the disadvantages, I will say, is that, again, you better get things right pretty quickly because you don't have a lot of room for error. In other words, if I get this base very off or something really off about this particular kind of drawing or sketching it out part, I'm not going to have a lot of room, fudging room, when I go to lay the pastels down. So I think artists who are able to achieve, good things on non-sanded surfaces have usually got some pretty good drawing skills, or they've painted for a while, and they've just gotten better. And so you can get in some loose, sketchy type of quality to your work with a very nice, loose, impressionistic style. And so, again, I really loved this. When I first started working on non-sanded paper, I did not love it because I wasn't very good. I didn't really know what I was doing with the pastels. So again, I think in time, your like or dislike for unsanded surfaces, your like for unsanded surfaces will get better as you get better. And it's also, I know someone already commented on one of the little community posts that I made on the YouTube channel, that it's really such an advantage, the non-sanded surfaces, because they are so much less expensive than the sanded papers. So so don't throw the non-sanded papers under the bus just because all the artists are saying you have to work on sanded surfaces. Play around with them every so often, and really they're great for just sketching and kind of playing around and getting better with a loose, sketchy style. So anyway, and I have sped this up a little bit for this video. Again, I try to keep my videos around an hour, not too much more than an hour, because my internet speed's kind of slow where I am, and it would take the video forever to upload, or I'd have to go somewhere else and upload it. But once again, take note of how my strokes are fresher, more fresh on the non-sanded surface, and I really did like the very chunky, kind of loose feel to this. All right, enjoy this, and I'll pop back in for some more comments and information soon. slow it up a little bit for some real-time footage here. I wanted to share with you kind of the concept of painting something with water in it, and to make that illusion is sometimes a bit of a challenge. But if you can keep in mind that you've got the stems that are within the vase, and then you've got the vase, which is see-through, but a way to enhance that illusion of there being glass there, you can put a sheen or a little glaze of a reflection on the glass, and that helps. That's what I did with that little bit of blue there. And I knew I was at the point here of just about finishing this up because, again, I was working on a non-sanded surface. Therefore, I knew I wasn't going to get a lot of layering potential. And I really like the idea of keeping this just very loose, painterly, and free, and giving more of the impression of the geraniums, I'm sorry, not geraniums, hydrangeas, rather than too much detail. So here's the final little painting. I don't think I got the best photo of it, but it gives you an idea of how you really can accomplish something on unsanded paper. Now it's time to use the same reference image and the same pastels to recreate this on a piece of sanded Sennelier Lacarte pastel card. And once again, I'm just getting in a sketch here. And, I showed the pastels there that I used, and I was hoping they were the same pastels. But as I mentioned, or I think I noted in the beginning of this video, I started the first non-sanded painting that you just saw while I was staying with my mother and father, and since then I had to try to pack up all of my things and try to keep those little pastels by themselves to bring back and finish the second part to this video back in my studio at home. So I wasn't sure if I got all of the pastels exactly the same as the first painting, and I think that's why there are a few little subtle differences with color. It wasn't like I was trying to recreate the exact same painting or feeling or colors. Most of the purpose was to show the differences between sanded and non-sanded surfaces. Oh, and I also wanted to share what was so special about this painting. I had a drawing for my patrons when I reached a particular goal, and whoever won the drawing was going to win some prizes: an original painting, a copy of my book, and a gift card. And the one who won the paintings or the prizes lived in Germany, and she decided she wanted to donate her prize to someone else. And it was so sweet of you. Thank you, Enid, for that. So I had another drawing, and that particular winner, Kathy, she decided she wanted to give the original painting to her sister, and she also didn't want me to have to send her the gift card. So she said, why don't you do a painting for your mom when my mom was going through her cancer treatments, and give it to her. So I did. This is what prompted this painting, and I also decided I wanted to give a print of this painting to Kathy. So it's hard to give anything away in our wonderful, generous group because everybody just wants to keep giving to others. I love you guys. That's so awesome. So this painting was called Flowers for Mama, and it went to the first painting on the unsanded paper went to my mom, and I came home to finish this one. So thanks everybody for your generous hearts, and it was just a beautiful story I wanted to share. Now I'm getting started with the pastels after having the general sketch, and also I wanted to mention too to keep in mind that this is on the Sennelier Lacarte pastel card, and I don't know if you recall from the beginning of this video, it is I would say a pretty heavily textured or gritty surface. So it actually would even behave differently than UArt paper or color fix paper or some of the other different sanded papers. I have some videos where I show kind of the different ways sanded surfaces behave. If I can remember, I'll try to put a link to it here, where I literally do the same thing. I have all these little samples of different sanded surfaces, and I show kind of how they behave with the pastels. They're all a little bit different, but there's advantages and disadvantages, to all of them. And everybody usually ends up with their favorite. And and everyone has their own reasons. I love how everybody is different, and how, I really love how we have the same reference image sometimes in our Monet Cafe art group on Facebook, and how we'll have artists all paint the same reference image, and there's so many different variations, and they're all beautiful and they're all unique. Isn't that wonderful how God's created us unique, and how He's the master creator? It's awesome. So anyway, this is a very heavy sanded surface, and some of the advantages of sanded paper might have even shown up more by using like a U-art. But one of the advantages of the sanded paper is that you can get a lot of layering in. So right now, if I didn't have the vase just right, I've got a little bit more room for correcting it. But I never think that's a good idea with something like this. Try to get it right from the get-go. Now, it's not the same with like trees and leaves and flowers. You've got a little more freedom with that because of the fact that in nature they can grow and turn and, be different in their positioning and things like that. Of course, you still got to keep some of the rules right, like with perspective and, general concepts, botanically rendering the flowers somewhat correctly, but when it comes to, like I said, people, objects, buildings, animals, there's things you just want to get right, and a vase or dishes, anything with an ellipse, like a cylindrical object, you want to try to get those right, because it very quickly can have your work look more amateurish if you don't get those things right at the beginning. Now, in this one, other than just talking about the advantages of sanded surface, I wanted to also share a little bit more about kind of how I work. In this one, I wanted it, like the other one, to be more loose, impressionistic. And wouldn't it be a real pain to try to paint every single little one of those flower buds? Because hydrangeas, I love the fact that each flower looks like a bouquet of flowers, because they all have these, one flower head has all these little individual flowers on it. Well, that's a lot of little flowers, and unless you're really into realistic painting or photorealism, then you would want to do it in that case. But in my case, I like more of that impressionistic style, and I love just suggesting something rather than making it absolutely every item actually there. Our brains can do something called closure, where it will figure something out if it's just suggested. Now, I want to mention here too, I think I actually had some of those the pinks that I had down on that flower to the bottom right. I had a little bit light. I needed to darken it up, because typically with flowers, what I do is I put in the darker color as the base. I'm just correcting some of the drawings here of the leaves. But I put in the darker color, and then I gradually layer the lighter values on top of that. They're not going to look very three-dimensional if you just put down all of the light colors first and try to add darks later. It doesn't even really work. So typically get the darkest color in first, and often it's darker than you think. And then you get your medium values and your lighter values. So try to work dark to light when it comes to flowers. And also too, again, try to remember that we are painting shapes, and if you get general shapes in, and you don't have to be so specific about every flower, then later you can go in with just a few that give the mind or the brain the impression as to what flower that is. I'll try to talk about that a little bit more at the end. But basically, each one of those little individual flowers in the hydrangea head has a little center to it. And if you focus on the photo, you can go in with your eyes and visually see every single center in the flower. But you don't need to do that in a painting. You really only need to put those centers where you feel it would have the most impact or beauty, and just suggest the other ones, and let it be more free and more softer, and give the mind something to imagine, and an ability to kind of play around in the painting rather than giving it every single piece of information. I hope all that makes sense. Sometimes I don't know if I'm describing these things right, but again, I'm keeping this one very loose. You might be able to tell just from my strokes here that it is a very gritty surface. So it does come out a little softer in the end result than, like I said, maybe a UArt paper might not have as soft of a final result. I think pastel matte, even though I've never worked on that, I need to get some of that, also has the same, more of a dreamy end result based on some of the artist works that I've seen on that. So Sennelier, I don't know, I've talked to artists or seen artists who, I don't want to say it's a love-hate thing, but there's some people like, I don't really care for it, and the other people, I love it. I don't work exclusively on it, but I really do love this. So again, I am able, even with these leaves, I already know I'm working dark to light. Notice I got a lot of those darks in, but I already know I'm going to be able to get more layering on these. So I can get my darks in, and I know I can gradually start adding my medium value greens, and then finally the parts on the leaves that will have the most highlights. And keep in mind too, we want to pay attention to the direction of the light. In this particular case, the light, I could tell it from the reference image, was coming from the upper right, maybe not way up high, but maybe a light from inside the house. So that was where I ended up focusing on more of the highlights there. All right, I'm going to continue to work here. But again, one of the advantages about the sanded paper is I've got a lot more room for layering, and the color typically does come out more vibrant. Also, too, you can get more of your buttery pastels down better, like your Sennelier, your Terry Ludwig, your Unisons. And so with a sanded paper, you can get those real softies down at the end for that real impact. And you can't get them quite as good on the non-sanded papers. All right, so continuing to paint. You guys enjoy. here's where there's another advantage to using the sanded papers is that while you can sort of use a harder pastel at the end of a painting on a non-sanded surface, not with a lot of success. However, on sanded papers, of course, if you haven't overlayered that surface, you can use these harder pastels, like these little sticks I have. They're called New Pastels, I believe by Prismacolor, yeah, New Pastels, NU Pastels. And they work very well for line work. You still have the ability, you know, kind of to get some sketching and drawing in, whereas with non-sanded papers, it definitely gets more challenging more quickly than it does with sanded surfaces. Some of this that I'm applying now in the kind of the center where those leaves are, deep down where the stems are going into the glasses, it may appear to be a little bit dark, but again, I'm getting my dark down first so that I can layer my lights down. I know there's some dark shadows in there, so I got those in. Now I'm using a combination of different some purples even in there. Purples are great in the shadows, but there are some little like leaves within the stems right as they come out of the top of the vase there that I gradually add some greens in. So notice how by the end of the painting, these darks that I'm adding, they're going to really lighten up, but that's what's going to give that sense of depth and that three-dimensional feel that there is some depth to that. The leaves are coming out of the shadows, in other words. All right, so I'm going to finish this one up and then jump back in at the end, and hope you guys are enjoying this whole process so far. I had to comment again, I just wanted to make mention that these little highlights that you see me, I'm still doing some stems there, but when you see me adding the little blues and purples, I'm not there yet, onto the top of the glass, that is what's, again, going to give that illusion of three-dimensional feeling of the vase, that the vase is outside of those stems and that water. Also, the thing that's going to make that illusion happen is getting that ellipse correct, that cylindrical shape within the vase. Keep in mind that the edge of the ellipse on the two sides is not going to go all the way to the edge of the vase, because you've got to remember that vase has some thickness to it. So you want to make sure it's smaller than the edge of your glass. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now I'm finally adding those blue highlights onto the glass, and even that little rim. Did you see how I just added that little teeny bit to the rim? And it gives just that feeling of reflection on the rim of the glass. So all those teeny little things just give it more believability and more accuracy. And also a teeny little shadow under the vase there. Oh, I was praising the Lord. Sorry, in fast motion it looks a little weird, but I had some praise and worship music going, and sometimes I just don't even care that I'm filming myself. I know most of you guys get that. I'm so thankful for all of you, and what a beautiful group of artists that I have that visit Monet Cafe on YouTube, the Monet Cafe Art Group on Facebook, and my precious patrons who are so kind to support me. And you know, you guys in the Monet Cafe YouTube channel here, you should really be thankful to the patrons as well, because they're the generous souls that have been helping me. And you know, I know it's only $5 a month to join. It doesn't seem like a lot to you guys maybe, but it's huge to me that you guys would do that. And it does add up, and how it benefits Monet, not only the patrons, the Patreon account people who are the members of my Patreon account, they get some extra content, and we have a nice little intimate group, and I'm trying to do some critiques of their art, and but it benefits the YouTube channel, because that's the way that I can get things financially that improve the channel. For example, the light that I've been using that I mentioned at the beginning of this video has greatly improved my ability to create paintings when it gets darker. I have some studio lighting, but it's not the greatest, and so this light has helped a lot. So everybody should thank my Patreon account holders or members, they're called patrons, for all the little things that you guys have done to help this channel. So anyway, here's the final. It's a little dark right here. I think I might have forgot to turn my light on, but you get the idea of, can you tell the brilliance of this? I don't know if the photo that I provided at the end in the beginning of this video gave it justice, but the depth of the sanded surface, see, it's not even the same here as when I showed it like in real life, but the depth of it, the ability for detail, the ability for richness and layering is awesome with the sanded surface. But the looseness, the freedom, and that spontaneity and sketchy quality of the non-sanded surface is awesome too. So you guys just keep painting. Paint a lot and you'll find your favorites, and you just might do like I did. Come back and love the non-sanded surfaces as well. All right, guys, happy painting. I'm so blessed for each and every one of you. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. Feel free to comment and come back often. All right, guys, happy painting.